So, armed individuals in tactical gear are showing up at Arizona ballot boxes. So, armed individuals dressed in tactical gear surveilling ballot drop boxes in Arizona, raising concerns about intimidation during early voting in the midterm elections. The Maricopa County Elections Department said 2 people with weapons were spotted at a ballot drop box in Mesa on Friday. The 2 wore masks, realistically they wore balaclavas, to obscure their faces and left the area after the county sheriff's office responded. And on Saturday night, 4 people, 2 of them reportedly armed with handguns, got into a confrontation at the same drop box when another individual arrived and attempted to record their license plate information. He chased over at me and pushed me and grabbed me as I was pulling the cloth of his license plate to video his license plate. The woman, who is dressed as a nun, told KTVK News, "I just felt fair is fair. They're videotaping voters' license plates, so I didn't think it was really a big deal to photograph theirs." And of course, this person's just like, people don't generally like having private information photographed by strangers. And then this is the covering that they were using.
To be fair, a license plate is not exactly private information.
No, it's not.
It's not.
It's not.
So, I mean,
but you do know that, like, the reason that they're covering their license plate is because they know that the liberals and Antifa will dox them and come for their families.
Exactly.
But Danny, before we even talk about it, how do you feel about them watching the ballot boxes?
Well, if I remember, like, going through, I still have to see it like that. There's a documentary called
2000 Mules.
2000 Mules. Okay. Which, if you haven't seen it, I recommend you see it. I've heard nothing but good things about it. I still want to see it, but it's supposed to be good. But there are problems in the American voting system, and one of the most easy to exploit issues is ballot boxes, because we heard stories of ballot boxes, whether it's Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, like lots of places where the chain of custody was broken on a lot of them, where they couldn't actually track the chain of custody. And also, people would go to these ballot boxes with massive amounts of voting ballots, and they would drop them in. Now, that should be concerning. And if you're going to say election, darn right, I'm questioning election problems, because if you think that people are not that nobody's going to try to cheat, you're an idiot.
Yep.
Because anybody who this is the reason why we create.
Well, leading up to the election in 2020, we covered plenty of stories about ballot harvesting. Jeez, and the 2000 Mules movie. Now, of course, we can't say for 100% that it's proof, but it alleged, and we think that it's fairly serious and obviously pretty good information and evidence, that there were tens of thousands of ballots that were artificially dropped off and harvested, and that these people would do this over and over and over again, and sometimes into 2 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah, and this isn't circumstantial evidence, by the way. This is like he goes into how this evidence is fairly compelling.
Yeah,
evidence.
It is.
In a court of law, that would be okay, that's fairly decent evidence. It's not hard, bam, undisputable proof, but it's very strong evidence. So I'm not surprised that there are people who are genuinely concerned about elections and about election integrity that are trying to take these matters. Because, obviously in Arizona, we know that Maricopa County was one of the ground zeros of election questions, right? So I'm not surprised that people are trying to take this matters into their own hands. One of the problems is that we know that the liberals have no morals.
Yep.
They don't. The ends always justifies the means with them, which is why I'm not surprised to see conservatives actually trying to take matters into their own hands. And just watch. I believe that this will probably be a bigger thing. But remember in the 2020 election that they were they used all these underhanded tactics to try to get conservative the observers.
Yep.
To kick them out, to remove them, or find excuses to kick them out. Poll watchers. They find ways. I guarantee you that that they've learned, and that they're going to take every precaution in the book.
Well, okay.
Make sure that doesn't happen again.
Citizens will take every precaution in the book. the higher up Republicans probably won't.
No.
Because the higher up Republicans, especially those who want to be seen as bipartisan, like, say, Brian Kemp.
Mm-hmm.
Brian Kemp was like, well, I thought the election was legitimate and free and fair, so that's why I encourage Raffensperger to verify the election results. And it's like, why are you doing this? It's not because, like, you actually believe it was free and fair? Really?
Yeah. No, there's no courage in that.
And like he basically said, "Oh yeah, like there's no reason to have further investigation."
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, why? Why would you not have and encourage further investigation? Like when they did the further investigation in Arizona, I think what was it? They found 48,000 ballots that they couldn't properly find. They couldn't account for where they came from.
Yeah, actually, they found the same thing in Georgia. There was like a ton of like
there was a ton of stuff like that. Like they found, I think it was 4,000 ballots in Georgia.
Yeah,
that were that were doubles, and they had like photographs, and it's like this is from this bin and this is from this bin, and they have exactly the same person signing, and it's exactly the same person voting.
Yeah,
and it's like why isn't this national news? And it's like, well, they're trying to cover it up.
Yeah, it's the problem. Problem is always is that it's obvious that there was problems, but they don't want you to they're telling you don't believe your lying eyes, believe what we tell you. That is the tactic.
Yeah.
So
really last week, the Secretary of State referred a report of voter intimidation to the State Attorney General's office and the United States Department of Justice. After a voter reported being approached and followed by a group of individuals while trying to drop off a ballot. We're deeply concerned about the safety of individuals who are exercising their constitutional right to vote, who are lawfully taking in early ballots to a drop box. Uninformed vigilantes outside Maricopa are not increasing election integrity. Really?
Yeah, it's difficult because, so here's the problem with what they're doing. Is it going to be effective? Because they technically don't have...
They don't have any authority.
They don't have any authority or any jurisdiction. If let's say, for example, hypothetically that somebody does come up and they're planning to cheat. Okay, like they come up with these things. What are they going to do? All they can do is videotape them.
Yep.
Actually, you'd probably be more effective videotaping people because that would probably be more like, oh, I don't want to be caught on tape, than standing out there with a gun and all that. So this is an example of, I think, poorly thought out strategy. Because really, what are you going to do? You're not going to use those guns. You're clearly not going to any attempt to.
Yeah,
is going to be.
No, it's a much wiser idea to have basically each ballot drop box.
Yeah,
there should be somebody wealthy enough to set up a fund for like the next couple weeks.
Yeah,
just to say, okay, we are going to put a camera there. And it's going to be constantly rolling.
Yep.
And it's going to be there's going to be another camera which is monitoring the parking lot. And if one person drops off more than one ballot, then we're going to be monitoring those cars.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just basically accountability.
Yeah. Accountability and trying to ensure that what happened in 2000 Mules, whether it happened as Dinesh said or not, can never happen again. And if it does happen again, then they have more than receipts enough to say, all right, this is disputable to the highest degree. And if you, like, honestly, if they continue to doubt what's going on and they continue to say, oh, no, it's just right-wing conspiracy theories, none of this is actually happening, there's no fraud, it will only continue to divide the country, and then we'll have more instances like this. Senator Marco Rubio says supporter was brutally attacked while canvassing for him. He tweeted photos of a man wearing a Rubio for Senate t-shirt. He said the man was also wearing a Ron DeSantis hat. He suffered internal bleeding, a broken jaw, and will need facial reconstructive surgery. According to an arrest report, he said he was walking around a neighborhood near East 60th Street, handing out flyers when he came across a man who was allegedly blocking the sidewalk. The victim told police that Lopez confronted him, said he could not pass the sidewalk in front of his home. When the victim walked towards the street, he said, "You can't pass by here. This is my neighborhood." Victim told Lopez, "This is public property and I can be here if I want to." And then they began to argue. Report says another person came and kicked Lopez right side of his face, which is odd.
Mm-hmm.
And then Lopez began to punch the victim's face multiple times, causing severe swelling and his right eye to be completely shut. According to Rubio's tweet, there were 4 attackers who allegedly told the victim Republicans aren't allowed in this neighborhood. So, yep. That's the kind of stuff will only become more common when you seek to further divide the country. You want to unite the country, not behind a political party. You want to unite the country behind what is true. If you have half the country that cannot, and it varies. It's like in 2016, you had half the country, quote unquote, saying the Russians interfered with the election, and then it was an illegitimate election. 2020, you had the other half, but for a lot more valid reasons than the Russians.
Well, here's the thing, though. I mean, like, we always hear about, like, oh, everyone's... Okay, are we forgetting something very important? Remember what Biden did in his most famous speech ever?
Yep.
When in front of that, like, red background, calling half the country... calling half the country basically terrorists, fascists, all that kind of stuff. People, I hate to say this, but there are so many people who will believe that, who feel empowered.
Well, it's exactly the same here in Canada.
Yeah, they're basically empowered and emboldened by very dangerous talk, to the point where they legitimately believe that these people are horrible, dangerous, And I mean, this is only scaled up. So the government, all of these officials, all of these politicians, all of these entertainment figures, they are all working together to create hatred for an identifiable group of people, and this is the result. This didn't happen in a vacuum. It's like if you meet somebody and their kid is super racist and super rude and super hateful, and they just yell and punch like people they don't like and all that, I'm like, yeah, that was the parents' fault. That was the parents' fault for letting that kid, or either letting that kid become that, or basically like turning that kid like that. However, we somehow like see this kind of stuff, and we think like, oh, well, that's the individual's fault. It's like, no, there is a very large scale indoctrination thing that's emboldening and telling people it is not only okay to hurt people that you don't like, we're going to defend you. Yep. And we're going to empower you to do that. This is why we're getting this kind of crazy. Mm-hmm. It's terrible.
Yep. And stories like this are only furthering the divide. Hillary Clinton claims right-wing extremists already have a plan to literally steal the next presidential election.
Oh, she's encouraging election denial.
Oh yeah. Well, she always encouraged election denial. Yeah. Because with a face like this, how could you lose?
That would be like the ultimate scary Halloween.
Oh my goodness.
Right? That's a terrifying video.
Ugh. Yeah, 2-time failed presidential candidate and Russian collusion conspiracy theorist Hillary Clinton has a new warning for Americans. Right-wing extremists are planning to steal the 2024 election. Wonky, wide-eyed Hillary made the assertion in a special video message to Indivisibles' Crush the Coup. I know we're all focused on the midterm election, and they are incredibly important, but we have to look ahead because you know what our opponents certainly are. Right-wing extremists already have a plan to literally steal the next presidential election, and they're not making a secret of it.
You can probably go to the video. It's just below.
Oh, this is just going to be wondrous.
Yeah. Lovely.
Indivisibles. I'm here to highlight something that is keeping me up at night. And I know this group really understands what I'm about to say. I know we're all focused on the 2022 midterm elections, and they are incredibly important. But we also have to look ahead, because you know what? Our opponents certainly are. Right-wing extremists already have a plan to literally steal the next presidential election. And they're not making a secret of it. The right-wing controlled Supreme Court may be poised to rule on giving state legislatures, yes, you heard me that correctly, state legislatures the power to overturn presidential elections. Just think, if that happens, the 2024 presidential election could be decided not by the popular vote or even by the anachronistic electoral college, but by state legislatures, many of them Republican controlled. But there's also good news in the face of this very real threat to democracy.
We can cheat our way out.
Indivisible has launched Crush the Coup to make sure we're ready to defend democracy in 2024. They've put together a list of critical races in 6 key states and how you can get involved.
Yeah.
This is like the most perfect example of projection.
Yep.
Like everything that so let's go through some of them. So what are some of the ways that the Democrats are literally trying to cheat in order to be able to increase their chances?
Mail-in votes.
What?
Mail-in ballots.
Mail-in ballots, because you can there's so many ways you can cheat. I would say they're trying to create laws where you don't need any voter ID whatsoever. Why would they do that? Not because they want to make sure that everyone can vote. It's because they want to ensure that people who either are ineligible to vote, which is anyone from illegal immigrants, but also
criminals?
Legal immigrants that have not yet become citizens, as well as criminals, as well as people that normally can't vote. Why? Because they know that
if they give them the right to vote, then they will be a voting bloc forever.
Actually, there was even a story I remember hearing about the 2016 election that Hillary got a ridiculous amount. They were speculating a ridiculous amount of illegal votes.
Mm-hmm.
It was a huge.
It was in the millions.
Chunk. It was in the millions, and I'm like, oh, that
doesn't surprise me.
Well, it's almost funny because that popular vote lead right there. So they find ways. They in the 2020 election, one of the ways that they found to try to manipulate the outcomes is they used dirty tactics to disqualify third party candidates.
Yep.
Several third party candidates were disqualified in places like Wisconsin, Michigan, and other places because they didn't want to split the vote between Joe Biden and others. And so they found dirty tactics like that. They used dirty tactics in Pennsylvania to try to break their own constitution to try to extend the amount of time that you could potentially vote. I mean, this is just projection to the greatest degree, right?
Yep.
Now, thankfully, there are some great people who are calling out garbage, and